Welcome, everyone. Happy you made it to our webinar today. And also today we have a tight schedule, so I'm going to get started right away and jump into today's webinar, in which we show you the reality of how AI adoption is being scaled across Europe. Now, I'm Felix. I am the host of today and Senior Account Manager here at PAC. And today's keynote speaker is Spencer Izard. Spencer is a leading analyst in our AI cluster, and he has seen all the sides of the IT industry, from being a CIO, working at a software company, and also having experience as an analyst for several years. I'm not sure if I can say decades, Spencer. But yeah, we will get started right away. Some technical information beforehand. All the participants, all of you, you are on mute. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom. And we will be recording this webinar. So in the end, you will receive the recording as well as the presentation that is shown to you today. Yeah, and with that, I would say, Spencer, I hand over the microphone to you.
Thank you, Felix. And as much as I'd like to not admit it, it is definitely multiple decades now. And no matter how much soft focus I put on a photo of myself, I can't hide that. But thank you. If we just move over to today's agenda, I'll be breaking down some results from an AI survey, which I'll explain in a second, the detail of that, across these different areas today on the agenda. So I'll give you some context on how European organizations are going on that journey right now. And then we'll break down some more detailed areas around data, responsible AI, explainable AI, and then finally, the hot topic of the world of in the last couple of years, generative AI. Once I've done that, we'll hand back to Felix, who will take us through the PAC research agenda for 2025, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A. So if I move forward, and what I'll do now is I'll just give you a little bit of context of the survey that we ran. So, like all of us in this industry, we have a lot of conversations with, and I do in particular, with software firms, service providers, and also enterprise, the buyer side clients. And we've definitely been hearing a consistent set of themes over the last few years in regards, especially particularly regards Europe, but frankly, worldwide in general. And we felt it was really important then to run a buyer-specific style survey of leaders across Europe to understand not what they're doing with AI, but how are they looking to scale it in their organizations? How far away are they from being a large scale kind of deployment? So the survey results came in about 3.5 weeks ago, so beginning of October. And it covered 550 respondents. Actually, I think we got around 565 in the end. 5 countries and 3 regions, those being UK, Germany, Spain, Italy, and France, and the 3 regions being Benelux, the Nordics, and Austria and Switzerland. And that was across 10 industries. The main areas of the survey covered, much like the agenda, covered data management, responsible AI, explainable, and Gen AI. And for the purpose of today, that's the narrative path I'll take you through, and you'll see why we've gone through it in this particular way as I continue. We also had a section of questions around security. Now, I should point out that from a security perspective, these questions weren't about security teams and security departments. They're about how organizations are looking at securing AI specifically. So there's some really interesting insights there around adversarial AI and elements around that. Also, I want to highlight, because sadly, with the time that we've got together, I won't have time to go through this, but for each of the 10 industries, I created individual business operating model workflow specific questions for each of the industries, because this is probably the first trend in my multi-decade career where the level of awareness has been equally at the business leader and the technology leader level in organizations. So most of the questions that I get, frankly, is more about a specific business workflow in healthcare or a specific business workflow in finance or insurance and how AI can help that. So we felt it was very important to get that insight as well. If you'd like any more information around those types of areas, please do contact myself or a member of the PAC team, and we'll more than happily follow up with you afterwards. So If we start talking about the survey results now and giving you an idea, what I wanted to do is give everybody an idea on this webinar around what stage organizations are at with scaling AI, and also how they're planning to invest for the next couple of years. And again, I'll reiterate, this is European-wide data across the whole survey. If you have a specific country you need information on, we can break it down to that level as well. So 20% are currently in a research and experimentation phase, 23 initial pilots, and then 27 at scaling across use cases. Well, I just want to highlight on the scaling across use cases. Please don't interpret that as what large scale business adoption across a whole of an organization. This is more a focused use case scale. So, for example, would be organizations who are looking at generative AI for marketing or type content, creative content creation. So they're looking maybe at, say, the Adobe suite or an equivalent type product, and are looking at scaling that across their organization because it has a very more stable use case for them. Most of the organizations I speak with are definitely in initial pilot stage, and as we go along with the presentation, you'll see some of the reasons why that is, because I often get asked what's stopping people from moving further. Well, we'll cover that today in the presentation. So over the next 2 years, respondents, 39% of respondents said they're going to increase their AI budget by 25%. 34% said by 26 to 50, and a very enthusiastic 23% said a 51% to 100%. Now, I would just also highlight with that 51 to 100, that can often be smaller budgets that are increasing rapidly. That doesn't necessarily mean that's organizations with large budgets from the start. I'd also point out that for the majority of organizations, it's definitely still in that lower half, but most of the people I speak with, they are planning on increasing over multiple years. They just need to get past some of the concerns they have now to have a level of delivery comfort and value recognition comfort that allows them to scale the investment. So, just to talk now about how are both business leaders and technology-focused leaders challenged differently in scaling AI. I've picked out the top three. We start with, on the left is the business, on the right in blue is the technology side leaders. So as you can see, the third most challenging factor for business leaders is integrating AI outputs into decision workflows. That can be understanding how operating models and business behavior needs to change to get more value out of AI, as well as integrating systems and integrating other processes like that. On the technology side, which is often a factor, is securing business stakeholder essentially buy-in and engagement on that side of things. And there's always that expectation to reality, technical balance that needs to happen. The second priority is for business leaders is managing skills transition at 22% here. And then what I would say one of the classics in IT developments in general is data readiness issues, and AI is no different to that, and we'll talk about data more in a second. The managing the skills transition on the business leadership side isn't really a technical conversation for most organizations. It's more along the lines of, okay, how do I need to help reskill my staff to understand the value and the role of AI in how they can operate, and also get their input on how they see that impacting their roles. And the number one challenges across Europe is, right, and from the business side, no surprise, understanding AI use cases, the ROI, TCO, business value conversation comes into that quite strongly, and that's where we're seeing quite a lot of discussion at the moment. And on the more technical side, of course, it's the sort of engineering skill gaps. It goes without saying, there are still a lot of skill gaps in organizations that just don't have the current right skills they need or access to them, which is a good opportunity for the service for the service provider community. If I move now into one of the more specific areas, so the role of data, I would just highlight the fact that obviously, stating the very obvious here is that no investment in AI is really going to return the value that any organization needs without a very well-grounded data strategy. And you might find that's an obvious comment, but actually it still comes up now in a lot of conversations, sorry, that I have, where the data strategy is sometimes being thought by at business level after the opportunity of AI, whereas it should be thought up front. So we just wanted to highlight now what are the data challenges that are barriers to scaling AI. But before that, I'll just highlight that we asked organizations, how data ready are you? And the biggest response was this one. 47% said they're somewhat data ready, but facing challenges with regards to AI. And I think all of us who have been around the IT industry for a few years, whether it's data warehouses, big data, data now lake houses, whatever it is, data has been worked on for a lot of years, but organizations continue to struggle with this and continue to struggle how they can operate effectively with all the data. And frankly, AI is continuing to put a spotlight on this for them. But going to the top three challenges, number one across Europe is data sovereignty requirements, which I don't think is particularly surprising and is very well understood how important that is across Europe. I would also say now there's a growing conversation, which I think will happen over the next few years more around actual AI sovereignty. And which is, where obviously the AI models are physically operating if they're being operated from a cloud service. Number two, we have establishing trusted AI governance. A lot of the concerns are without AI governance, how will the data, be as managed as effectively as it could be? And then number one, obviously data quality issues, which we saw as a bit of a theme on the last slide. If we move now to having a conversation around the results around responsible AI, and I just want to set the theme for this. So there's a lot of obviously phrasing in the AI world of explainable AI, generative AI, responsible AI. A lot of those are technologies at their core. Responsible AI is actually really not a technology at its core. Essentially it's a service, an operating model. There's a combination of accounting for companies' culture, governance, security. There is a technology element in that as well, but it's a way of managing, securing and managing AI models and AI functions and the outcomes of it across an organization. And it's still relatively immature. You'll see in a minute how organizations have more awareness of it now, but it's still relatively immature, and it's a significant opportunity for service providers and software partners to work together to provide this at scale for organizations because it is quite complicated to deal with. One of the questions around this is, which areas are you actively exploring responsible AI use cases for? Because we want to get a sense of, how mature is the thinking in the buyer side. At number five, they indicated at 40%. And I should point out, if you see RU or RD, that's rounded up or rounded down. And you'll see why there's an RU on there in the next one, because the next one is also 40%, but rounded down. So just so you know why that's got that acronym on there. But at number five, we've got using responsible AI for governance, of course, for management and compliance, ethics principles and policies. Now, that's a really important area that at the moment hasn't got enough attention around having new types of employees and new type of skills around ethicists who are experts in understanding the different types of ethics behaviors within different countries, different regulatory area requirements, and how they need to overlap and how they affect a model to ensure there's consistency. And number four, the one that you probably hear the most around responsible AI, which is the focus around fairness, bias detection, and mitigation, which is incredibly important. Number three, techniques for explainable AI, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you can't really drive an effective responsible AI solution that deals with fairness, bias, and ethics without a level of transparency that a lot of large language models and deep learning in general can't currently provide at that fine grain that's needed. Number two, AI safety engineering, robustness controls to ensure that coding and development and corrections to models are done in the safest manner possible, and there's consistency there. And then at number one, the one I'm actually really glad to see as number one is around privacy, security, and data protection, which for me over the last few years has actually been a conversation area that has been not so focused on, which is that there is obviously a significant new, frankly, potential for different types of security breaches, of how AIs can be affected and influenced in negative ways that don't have to be through traditional hacking means, can actually be through data manipulation and test data manipulation and areas such as that. So it is incredibly core to responsible AI, the security piece. Positively, 46% of European organizations said that responsible AI is a high priority for them. If you'd have had asked me this a year ago, in all honesty, responsible AI was barely mentioned and barely talked about. The most focus of the conversation was on that fairness and bias mitigation. It's incredibly encouraging to me that even in the space of a year, leaders, business and technology side are understanding just how important getting this part of the sort of AI operational element correct and effective. I think that's very encouraging. And then lastly, for this section, if we talk about, what is the primary driver behind responsible AI initiatives, obviously is going to, as we've been talking about, mitigating bias and any form of discrimination in models. I would point out that bias and discrimination will obviously change with regards to what regions or countries a model is required to support, because ethics and bias can often be defined more strongly by the particular country that you operate in. I was speaking to a business leader the last few months who was convinced that the way they developed their models would be applicable to all use cases in their business. And I asked them, do you operate in countries outside of the UK? They said, yes, they do. They operate here, here, and here. And then we had a discussion about, well, there are ethical nuances that are different, they're based on cultures and obviously some laws across many different international countries. So the ethics models and responsible AI models applied in one country aren't necessarily a fit for every country. So there's a lot of new sort of ways of thinking around AI that's already starting to develop operationally. Next up is using it for building stakeholder trust, which I think is fairly understandable. And then finally, regulatory compliance and requirements. That one tends to come up top most of the time because, of course, often there's a outside of the public ramification, there's a financial ramification to that as well. If we move now on to explaining the outputs of AI, so the explainable AI conversation, what I will preface this with is that the current maturity of the majority of large language models and deep learning that organizations can have access to now don't have a granular decision by decision capability built into them to provide complete transparency on the decision trees of the results provided back to us. So that's why currently the need for an adjacent parallel technology, so explainable AI, to basically translate and provide transparency has become an important factor. There's already work in academia happening quite rapidly to address this for large language models and other forms of deep learning to have more explainability built into them. But the current iteration and cycle of maturity in this space, there is a lot of issues around explainability for organizations. So just covering the survey results, we wanted to know what the primary drivers and then the areas that explainable AI were being used for or will be used for. As you can imagine, mitigating the risks and failure modes, as much as leaders like to think that deep learning is a really accomplished product, all AI models still have a significant error curve that you have to manage against. And then you need explainability to understand if the model is inherently broken and has, unrepairable errors, or if the errors are based on some form of data input or output or decision process. So that's where that's important. Of course, enabling human and AI collaboration. I was talking to another leader about this, saying, look, the reason why this is important is if you were to ask a human to provide you 5 options on something, and then you didn't like option 2 and 4, you could ask them, can you please explain how you came to those conclusions? And then that employee would typically go through it in detail and show you that's how I came to this conclusion. one of the issues with a lot of AI, for example, in healthcare, insurance, or financial services, is that you've got to make decisions that impact people. And so you need as much information as possible and the ability to interrogate the results of an AI to be able to understand if it's correct, or if you have confidence as the human to make the final decision. Then lastly for this, of course, is building customer trust and acceptance. And that, by the way, can be internal customers as well as external, the public as well. When we look at the system, the areas applied to, I mean, given the level of manufacturing that occurs across Europe, I don't think it's much of a surprise to see, look, more transparency around industrial control systems is very important. Exploratory analysis and discovery and explainability of that. A lot of organizations are pointing large language models already at large amounts of data to try to expose more insight than they had previously. But of course, again, they need to be able to trust the results. And then finally, customer facing services. I've already mentioned a little bit about healthcare, banking, and insurance. And so it is really important, obviously, to have that human in control, human decision maker, but having the ability to interrogate the results. So for customer facing decisions, they can feel comfortable of the level of insight they're getting for what they need to provide back to the customer. And then also for chatbot type scenarios as that grows in use as well. Oh, actually, I forgot. I have one more slide on this, actually, the biggest challenges around explainable AI. So scalability of XAI into production is a concern for organizations because there is a cost overhead to that, running it alongside generative AI, and there is some cost concerns. Aligning XAI with existing workflows because there is some more operational complexity that needs to come into that. And then finally, performance to explainability trade-offs. So much like in years before, where organizations have had concerns of layering in new security technologies, or in that time when we moved from physical hardware to virtualization, there's always this concern of what's the performance hit on this. And then the use of explainable AI does currently have a performance hit because it's not built into most large language model technology or deep learning technology. Final section for today is just to talk about the reality of generative AI, because it's still very much talked as a hype topic, and then there's lots of enthusiasm about it. So I just wanted to just finish off with just setting that scene a little bit. And one of the questions I wanted to ask in the survey was, like, over the next year, how much are you prioritizing of a priority is the adoption of generative AI for your organization? 23% said moderate, 39% high priority, and 29% top priority. I've obviously highlighted high priority in green, not just because it's the largest one, but high priority with exec support is definitely the one I'm seeing the most in conversations. And as I mentioned right at the beginning of this is mainly because this conversation about this technology wave has hit business stakeholders and technology stakeholders at pretty much the same time. So I'm seeing much more business leader, exec priority level support than a lot of previous technology waves where it took a little bit longer and a little bit more justification. The question is how does that then relate to managing the benefit to the challenge, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So what business area does generative AI provide the biggest value? Marketing and content creation. I mentioned Adobe earlier. It's one of the easy, that type of content creation is one of the easy first areas for this type of capability. Software engineering and code generation. And a lot of that is because obviously code generation is quite a rigid, strict data set with regards to how you code. So there's not a lot of variability there. So there's reduced error rates on the results. So it's a good use case for generative AI. And then the biggest is for data analysis and knowledge discovery. And we see a lot of use cases, as I've already mentioned, around, say, healthcare, insurance, supply chain, manufacturing, through monitoring the operations of facilities and modeling production runs and stuff like this. So there's a lot of data analysis focus, as you can see from a European perspective. And the final slide of today's webinar, from my side anyway, is, what are the primary drivers for generative AI adoption, and what are the concerns? Now, I hope you'll see when I get to the 3 concerns that will be on the right side of the slide, I hope you see a theme from everything that we've talked about to this point, because it's a really good realization that organizations do understand what they need, what's holding them back from being successful, and where you as service providers and software firms could really help them with. So from a adoption area, they're looking at generative AI to enable new business, frankly, new business models, to enable new ways of engaging with the data and engaging with clients and engaging with prospects or governments, with citizens. 23% for enhancing creativity and innovation. That leans a lot into the sort of the marketing side of things, but also analysis on creating new products. And then finally, improving productivity and task automation, which we've discussed. But if we switch to the concerns, the third main concern is lack of model output explainability. The second is integration with existing systems and data. And the last one, number one concern for European leaders, is generation of misinformation and harmful content. So if you look at that, is at the 28%, that is responsible AI. 26% is the data management conversation, and the 18% is the explainable AI conversation. So it's really clear now that organizations definitely want to invest in this technology, and they want to year over year. But they're also realizing quite quickly and rapidly what are the things that are going to sort of hinder that growth and hinder that adoption, and that's where they really need the help with. So I just want to sort of sum up everything. Look, from my side of things, any advice I would give to yourselves or to any business leader is data is core first, but that responsible AI level and that service is the next element to really being able to drive value. And you're not going to achieve the value out of deep learning and forms of AI unless you establish this first. If you just rush to market with generative AI as is, even with some really capable business ecosystem solutions like Salesforce, ServiceNow, you will still have exposure because not all systems are created equally. So I think this is a very big opportunity for organizations to help enterprises through their journey. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for the time today, and I will now hand back to Felix.
Spencer, thank you very much. Okay, fantastic. So there have been a couple of questions coming in already. If you have any more, please use the Q&A at the bottom, and then I'll move on to my part. So I'm going to be showing you the research agenda for the upcoming months and years based on our AI-related research. So all you see here is our different products that we have, and I will jump to each of them, showing you the ones that we already published in Q3, the ones that are still coming this year, moving on to 2025 and 2026, Q1 and Q2. So starting with the CxO survey, and this is just what Spencer showed you, the AI survey that we published now beginning of October, I believe it was, or that we did not publish, or where the results came in and we analyzed. So this survey can be used internally by you, the results for strategic purposes or also for communication purposes, if you want to use the results that we just showed, or all the results that we have. There's a lot more behind it in your communications. So this one we did in Q3. What is coming up in 2025? And as you can see here, there's no specifically AI-related survey, but of course the topic will be in several other CxO surveys, which is banking, which we focus on, hope to publish in Q3, cloud in Q4, and manufacturing in Q1 2026. Moving on to our other product, and I'm sure most of you know our CxO research platform, which is known for our market figures and forecasts that help our clients to identify markets with best potential and to prioritize their investments. And here also we have AI, Gen AI, big data, and BI related figures for more than 35 countries, regions in Europe, and also worldwide. Same also figures for the same topics for 9 different industries in our core countries and regions. So these figures you can really take and put next to each other and compare which markets are most interesting to you. Then on the supplier side, we have the radars, and we recently published our AI-related services radar. A radar is a provider benchmark, which on the one hand can be used as a marketing tool for providers, but the actual use case of it is for end users as a selection tool of a fitting provider for their project. So we decided to repeat this radar and publish it again in Q3 next year. The production of it, if you want to plan your resources, will start mid of Q1 next year. So we just publish it. We're going to start producing it soon again, which takes about 3 to 6 months to do. Then also in our sustainability related services radar, there will also be some AI focus on that. So moving on to our vendor rankings, this is something you can use to communicate your market leadership role. So here we have specific rankings for our core countries and regions on AI services. So those rankings show the revenue, the growth, and also the market share of the top players in each market. And here's one example that you can see how you can use this in your communication, just showing your market leadership with a badge or with a graphic, as you can see on the side. So you will receive these slides. I just want to stick to the time. We're a little bit over it already, so I'll jump to my last slide, consulting services. So this is something we provide to software and IT service providers, but also to end users. We help our clients to understand their total addressable market. Now here specifically, of course, for Gen AI or data services, just to help you understand where to put your focus on. And also we help grow companies inorganically by finding fitting companies they can take over. Or also if you're planning on selling your company, we also help to find possible investors. So this is from our side. I just wanted to share something, our newsletter. If you want to stay up to date with our AI-related research, please subscribe. We also share the latest deals happening in Europe in the IT market, news, opportunities, if there's some changes in end user organizations that you can use as an opportunity to move into this client, and our latest research, as already mentioned. So, and there's a couple of questions that came in already. Please feel free to still submit your questions. We will go through a couple of them. We are already over time. The main part of the webinar is over, but we will take some time to answer a couple of questions. The rest of the questions that we cannot answer in this webinar, we will attend to afterwards and provide answers to you via email. So Spencer, I've got one question here for you. It's from Frank, and he's asking, how is the discussion about AI adoption different between Europe and the USA?
That's a good question. There is a lot less conversation around, I would say, sort of data regulation, data sovereignty conversations, concerns. There's also a lot less conversations that I'm having around ethics. Now, I don't mean that Americans are unethical or don't care about ethics, but I would definitely say that it's something that's a little bit more sort of sensitive around privacy, around sort of the European market, stuff like that. Given there's just the sheer size of the country of America as well, there's a lot less AI sovereignty conversations and data sovereignty conversations sort of happening at the moment, and that's sort of particular sort of focus area. There is still, where they're the same though, there is still definitely concerns with regards to models having models by, should we say, by big software companies, ensuring that their data is private in the use of, say the ServiceNow platform, for example. I mean, this, I would say it's an irrational concern, but there's some people are concerned of, if I put all my data into there, will other organizations get the benefit of that sort of large language model analysis that they may do? The answer is obviously no. All these organizations run everything in silos, but typically there's more adoption enthusiasm, I would say, in the States at the moment, but that's a typical cycle. And if we were to look at States to Europe, you typically see, obviously, the States tends to move quite fast. UK is not necessarily a fast, would you say fast follower? I mean, UK does go quite quickly after the States. And then there's often a little bit more sort of concern in mainland Europe, across most of the countries with regards to, privacy, as I said, security and elements to do with that. I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to explore it further if you need to afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Spencer, and also thank you, Frank, for the question. The next question from Sushan is, do you have any insights into which strategies have been most successful for organizations in scaling AI adoption and what pitfalls companies should be aware of?
Yeah. So that's actually a really good question. So I would say for a start is that when we talk about AI adoption, at the moment, really what I'm focusing on with the conversation today is more the deep learning side of things. Most organizations that I engage with, Europe, globally, have been using some form of machine learning for at least the last 8 years, I would say, through different systems and stuff. So it's when it becomes embedded in the tools that they're buying from big vendors, the adoption conversation becomes a little bit easier. It then just becomes a case of how do I switch it on and enable it in my process. When it becomes a conversation of applying, say, a deep learning, I'll give you an example. If it becomes a conversation of applying deep learning to risk and fraud detection within a bank, the conversations then change because it becomes more along the lines of, well, what do I need to make this successful? And also because of the business criticality and the regulatory and the sociological impact of making wrong decisions around risk and fraud, how do I get the trust? So that's why in both the survey and in the work that I do, the conversation really comes around that responsible AI conversation I talked about there, with setting in the guardrails around ethics, security, governance, explainability becomes core to this. And I think that's the main thing that's holding back organizations from really exponentially accelerating their adoption of deep learning, is until they get this correct, there's going to be a struggle. And frankly, for most organizations, they're not going to be able to do this at scale, without consuming it, I would suggest, as a service from a service provider type organization, because it's a lot of things to put in place from scratch even if you're a very large enterprise. So I hope that answers your question. Again, if it doesn't quite, do come back to us. I'm happy to expand on it more.
Fantastic. Spencer, I've got a little bit difficulties here. We've got so many questions. I'll pick one more, human relations related one from Susan. What trends are you seeing in how businesses build the right talent and foster a culture of innovation to support large-scale AI adoption across diverse teams and departments?
Right, so good. Yeah, that's also a good question. So, as I mentioned earlier, access to staff to skilled staff in this space is very nascent. Even though we have talked about the machine learning has been around for 8 years, that's machine learning. Data scientists around that space is a very different skill set to what's needed for even like prompt engineers and the like for deep learning. And also there is these roles I mentioned, and excuse my tongue as I say this, but ethicists, which are a relatively new role, and really not discussed that much, but people with the skills to understand the ethic complications of that need to be trained, deep learning models need to be trained and managed around across different circumstances. So most organizations that I speak with at the moment really don't know exactly what skill sets they need, and they don't necessarily know right now how to evolve that. Most of them are focusing on very technical skills, because again, we fall back to that being technology, technical skills. But that skills adjustment I mentioned earlier on the business side is about understanding what are all the other soft skills that you need to wrap around this, and what does staff need to know, how to get staff engaged. So there is a lot of work still to be done on this in this area. I would say a lot of this could also, without sort of not sound like a broken record, a lot of this can be driven out of the responsible AI initiatives, because it will identify what you need out of staff and stakeholders across organizations. And there also, just finally, there is a major requirement for people who are data asset owners within organizations to understand what that means in the connotation of how that data will then be used within large language models. So what's their responsibility with regards to data that they may be generating themselves, that then the models will use to generate further insight. I hope that helps.
Great. Spencer, thank you very much. So we will close the webinar now, I believe. So if you have any more questions, we will tend to all the questions as mentioned afterwards. If you have more, please feel free to reach out to any of us. And also, please feel free to sign up for our next webinar, where we'll be sharing the predictions in the IT industry for 2025. And we'll also give a short update of the IT market. This is happening on November the 7th. So thank you all for your attendance. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Spencer, for your time. And have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.